What's up everyone, it's Victon here with another Path of Exile build guide. Today we're going to be going over the insane clear speed Blade Vortex Fire Conversion Assassin. I'd go as far as to say this is in the top 3 for fastest clear speed builds in the game, and is also probably the cheapest of the 3. Now how we're going to do this is we're first going to roll some gameplay footage in the background while we talk about the build just a little bit, and then we're going to go over the skill tree, then talk about the gym setups, and lastly go over the gear. I'll include both budget version of this build and also best in slot options for each gear slot. So let's go ahead and roll that footage. Alright, so before we get into everything, if you end up enjoying this guide, do consider liking and subscribing. This is a newer channel, so every little bit goes a long way and is much appreciated. I also have several other build guides for Harvest League already out and a ton more to come this league. Okay, so while we have some gameplay going, I just wanted to mention a few things. First, how I do my guides is I try and keep them a bit shorter than others. I feel like those 30-minute build guides tend to be a bit overwhelming for newer players, and the experienced players just want to see the build in action and get the POB link if they like what they see. I'll of course give you everything that you need to know to get this build rolling and understand it completely, so no worries there. Now I'll start by saying the budget version of this build will cost you anywhere from 6 to 8 exalts, because there are a few mandatory items. For my in-game version, I've put in about 45 exalts into this character, crafting it all myself, and could still put another 40 plus exalts if I wanted to. Interestingly enough though, the clear speed for the budget version is still incredibly fast. It just lacks a bit of single target damage. The whole concept for this build is we're getting an enemies explode for 3% of physical damage on kill chest piece and converting all of that physical damage to fire damage. That physical conversion also applies to our main skill, Blade Vortex. With the explosions from mobs dying and the Herald of Ash overkill damage, you pretty much blow up packs of monsters on your entire screen with some clever AoE increasing items. All the while, you just run straight through them super fast and on to the next pack. It makes for insane clear speed. I use this build for farming seeds incredibly fast, which I then turn around and sell the harvest crafts. Also spawning Cyrus 8 super fast along the way for some extra currency. Doing this method, I've made about 140x in the past week on this character, which for me is the highest gains I've ever had in Path of Exile. You can start with the budget version and make your way up super fast by selling those seeds and crafts from how fast you farm them, so I definitely recommend this build even if you're not already rich. It'll make you rich along the process. Okay, so with that said, let's jump into Path of Building desktop app and go over the skill tree. First and foremost, I'll have a link to download the Path of Building in the video description. If you haven't used this before, it's basically used in every single build guide out there, so I definitely suggest picking it up. Once you have it downloaded, go to the top left corner and click Import Export Build, click Import from Pastebin, then go back to the video description and copy and paste the POB Pastebin link into this box right here, and you will be good to go. So what I've done here is I've set it up to where you can actually follow a leveling path for adding points. Just go to the bottom left here and click this, then click the different trees starting at your first ascendancy points up to your final build. Now I won't go over every single node here to keep it a little bit more simple. Just know that I have done a ton of testing, research, and collaboration, and this tree is what you want for maximum DPS and survivability for this build. Basically, we're picking up a bit of life, lots of crit nodes, all the power charge nodes, a bit of fire damage and leech, and most importantly we're going for Avatar of Fire, which when you combo with the 50% fire conversion from your gloves gives you 100% physical damage converted to fire, which you can easily scale with fire damage. Once you get closer to the end game, you'll start filling out some of the cluster jewels. The large cluster jewels you want to have are Battle Hardened, Force Multiplier, and Iron Breaker, all adding a ton of damage. You'll want 2 of these large cluster jewels. From there, we want to get 4 medium cluster jewels. The most important passive skill on medium jewels is Vast Power. This gives you insane added area of effect. Since you're going to have 10 power charges with this build, it gives you 30% AoE per jewel. Getting 4 of these is what makes you clear the entire screens, killing a single monster. Now, for the second passive on the medium cluster jewels, you can either go with Towering Threat for some extra life, or Magnifier for more damage. I personally went with a combo of both. You'll also be picking up Glorious Vanity Timeless Jewel with the tag Sacrificed in the Name of Doriani. This gives you access to Corrupted Soul for a good amount of defense, and Ritual of Immolation for fire damage and penetration. And lastly, we're picking up Transcendent Faith for a total of 56% increased crit multi. For Ascendancy, you first pick up Unstable Infusion for power charge generation, which is crazy good for leveling up. Then Opportunistic for some great movement speed, which helps leveling again. Then Deadly Infusion for damage and movement speed. And lastly, Mistwalker for a mix of damage and defense. And that's it for the skill tree, so let's go ahead and move on to the gem setups. Alright, so your main skill is Vol Blade Vortex, and your 4-link will include Power Charge on Critical Strike, Controlled Destruction, and Unleash. You add an Elemental Focus for your 5th link, and Fire Penetration for your 6th link. For your buffs, you want Herald of Purity, Herald of Ash, Anger, and at least a level 3 Enlighten, so you can actually reserve all of those and still use your skills. Next, I run a Steel Skin, Increased Duration, and Second Wind setup, and I put this on my left click so it constantly gives me a 2000 damage shield, which helps a ton for survivability. For your cast when damage taken setup, it's kind of personal taste, but what I've done here is I've gone with Enfeeble and Phase Run. For my movement skill, I have Dash, Second Wind, and Arcane Surge. For my damage utility skill, I have Vol Righteous Fire that I use on bosses. And lastly, I have a level 1 Precision that goes with the Watcher's Eye Jewel that I have, but if you don't have that Watcher's Eye Jewel, no worries, don't put in Precision here, it's all good. And that's it for the gym setups, so let's move on to the gear. So what we'll do here is we'll go over the best in slot items first, and then talk about a budget setup after that. First and most importantly is the chest piece. The build requires the affix, enemies explode dealing 3% of their life as physical damage, which then again gets converted 100% to fire damage by Avatar Fire in your gloves. On mine, I also went with Frenzy Charge on hit, a setup for the crazy expensive amulet that we'll talk about later, but if you don't plan on spending that 47 plus exalts on that amulet, then you don't need that, no worries. As an added bonus, I did get a chest which makes me immune to Elemental Reflect, so I can run that map mod, but again, it's not necessary and you don't have to get that if you don't want to. The next mandatory item is a pair of gloves that gives you 50% physical damage converted to fire, which again tops you off at 100% conversion. You either want to buy these straight up anywhere from 10 to 20x, or you can craft them yourself for about 3 to 5x or so. I'll leave a link in the description for a full guide on how to craft this item. Next, we'll pick up 2 Void Batteries, and ideally you'll want to craft 1% increased area of effect per 4% quality for both of them. For your helmet, you want a +1 to maximum power charges, and skills supported by Unleash have +1 to maximum number of seals, life, and a resist, and then ideally you also want nearby enemies have -9 fire resistances. I've been trying to get this but haven't been able to yet. Again, I'll have a link to a full guide on how to craft this helmet in the description. For boots, you want Tailwind boots with move speed, life, and resists. Same thing, I'll have a link in the description here on how to craft a pair of these boots, and it's actually surprisingly pretty easy. For your amulet, the absolute best in slot item is a Badge of the Brotherhood, but those are going for about 45x to 48x right now at a minimum, and aren't really needed in my opinion. Sure, they're going to give you a ton of extra damage and clear speed, but honestly, I don't know for that much. I just can't see if I can justify it for improving the clear speed just marginally when it's already so fast. I personally went with an amulet that has physical damage as extra fire damage and some crit multi with some life and resists. It gives me a ton of damage and costs a fraction of what Badge of Brotherhood costs. For your rings, the best in slot is 2 Circle of Anguishes with increased fire damage while affected by Herald of Ash and Herald of Ash buff effect. I got lucky and bought one with the implicit 6% spell damage per power charge, which gives you a total of 60% extra spell damage. That is insane, and you probably won't be able to find one. I think there was only 2 at the time of when I sold it. I bought it for almost 9x, and I actually ended up selling it for 45x. So don't worry if you can get one with that implicit. They're super expensive. As long as you can get one with the 2 Herald of Ash affixes, you're good. I personally didn't get 2 Circle of Anguishes, but rather I actually went with a Flammability on hit ring, which costs a ton less and still gives me good single target damage. For your belt, the best in slot is either a Headhunter or Torrent's Reclamation, but both of those are quite expensive. So what I did before I bought my Headhunter was just get a Stygian belt with good life roll, some dex and strength to simulate the Headhunter's attributes. As a placeholder, it was super cheap and it worked just fine for me. For my flasks, I have a Quicksilver with more move speed, a Diamond Flask with crafted additional crit, a Life Flask with bleed removal, an atziris Promise for elemental damage leech and extra damage, and the Best in Slot Flask, Bottled Faith for a ton of extra damage. And that's it for the Best in Slot items, so let's quickly go over some of the cheaper budget options that you can use to kind of get the build going where you can earn some currency. First is the gloves, because it's so important to get as much physical damage converted to fire. You can start off by getting a pair like this that's at least 25% converted to fire, some life, and some resists. It'll only cost you about 5 to 10 chaos compared to the 5 to 10 exalts for the Best in Slot item. Same thing here with the chest, just get a 6 link with the stat Enemies Explode for fizz damage. This will cost you about 4 to 5x compared to 10 to 20x for a Best in Slot chest. For the helmet, just get one with the 30% Blade Vortex duration enchant and craft it yourself using either Harvest or just essences. For life and resists, this is going to cost you about 30 to 50 chaos total compared to anywhere between 15 and 20 exalts for a Best in Slot one. For an amulet, you can of course get the super cheap 3 to 10 chaos one with physical damage as extra fire damage, some resists, and life. That's compared to a second Best in Slot amulet at 4 to 6 exalts, or the Badge of Brotherhood, which is again 46 to 48 exalts. And for the boots, just grab a cheap 10 to 20 chaos pair with movement speed, life, and resists. For rings, just go with cheap 10 to 20 chaos ones with life and resists. And same thing for your belt, a cheap 10 to 20 belt with life and resists. Once you start flying through maps and making tons of currency, you can easily start upgrading your items to their Best in Slot counterparts, and from there, the sky's the limit on how much you can make with this speed farming build. Yeah, that about covers it, guys. This build has been a ton of fun and exalt printing machine for me, so I hope you guys were able to get some good info from it, and if it does look interesting to you, then I hope y'all have a ton of fun with the build as well and also make tons of currency. Looking back, I would say this has been my fastest map character ever, and I don't use it for bosses though, so like Sirius or even Guardians, I do hop on my boss killing character, but that really hasn't been an issue for me. I know some of the other top speed farming builds are a bit better at boss killing alongside speed farming, but they end up costing a whole lot more than this one, so I just kind of stuck with this build and it's worked out really well for me. Anyways, like I said, I hope you enjoyed this guide. I would greatly appreciate if you subscribed and liked the video. It would definitely mean a lot. Check out my channel as well. I do have a few other build guides already out for Harvest League, and I do plan on releasing 2 more in this coming week and many more in the weeks to follow. Thanks everyone, and I will see y'all in the next one.